Nima and I are going to be talking some Argentina, and Nima needs a banner. Let me add that. Nima, I think I finally figured out why it keeps disappearing. Every time I share the screen, it disappears. I guess that's not a good answer, but at least I've found a cause and effect.
A correlation. You found a correlation.
Correlation, yeah. But it's added for now. How long ago was it, Nima? Some number of months ago when Milei got elected and he said, here's the things that we wanted to do. We said, sounds great, but watch out for this.
Yeah.
And it's time for us to, come back and take a check on what's going on and see whether or not if he watched out for this and what the results were.
Yeah.
I remember what's that?
Yeah, do you remember what we said back then?
Yeah, no, I remember from our first conversation, essentially, Milei comes on going, I'm going to cut all these things from the budget. That was his big thing.
Right. So, yeah, there was one thing I recall saying that I didn't think that he had the powers to do all these cuts.
Yeah, we were wrong there.
I guess so. Yeah, I guess it seems to be possible to do that.
And the things that he wanted to cut, in principle, we were like, yeah, get rid of the gender bullshit. Get rid of the climate change, whatever, out of the 23 agencies, you wanted to get rid of 15 or, whatever it was. And we're like, yeah, I mean, in principle, that all sounds good, but you can't just destroy the government the government deficit, because that's the private sector's budget. And
I think especially the kinds of programs that people would immediately notice will be stuff like unemployment, Social Security, and if I remember correctly, there was some cuts there planned, right? Or at this point, probably implemented, we might get.
Well, and then, of course, he comes out with the typical Austrian line, which is things are going to get worse until they get better. Mm-hmm. So we're actually going to be reacting to a video that somebody made here about the economics of Argentina. And if things are getting worse, the question then becomes, how long do things have to stay bad before the Austrian economist scratches his head going, maybe I got something wrong here. Mm-hmm. Right? So I think that's the dilemma. And then one complication I think we'll have to look out for is that Argentina has a real debt in U.S. dollars to deal with, right? That makes it different from the United States has this huge national debt. Yeah, well, it's in its own money that is created versus Argentina, where they have a real debt in a foreign currency that they have to contend with. So let me share the screen here. Add to scene, and then we're going to do it this way. Like this. Is that all showing up nice and squeegee on your end?
Yep.
Nima? Good. All right. So before I play it, this guy's name is Joe Blogs. I don't really know anything about him other than his YouTube video popped up for me at one point. So maybe he's good, maybe he's bad, but let's take a listen.
Hi, welcome back to Joe Blogs. In today's episode, I want to talk to you about what's happening in Argentina and to ask the question as to whether or not Javier Milei's rock and roll politics are working. Now, if you follow the channel, you'll be aware that Javier Milei is a very colourful character. He came to prominence during the presidential election, and he came from being an outside candidate to being the president of Argentina in a very short space of time. In fact, this is a guy who's only actually been in politics for around 2 years. So let's have a look at some of the highlights from his campaign.
skipping ahead here. Well, I did that to save some time. Apparently, that was a bad idea. The heck's going on here? We got a good internet connection.
Is that the people in Argentina were sick of the politicians running Argentina into the ground. This is a country that's had 6 recessions in the past 10 years, and historically, it's defaulted on its international debt obligations on 9 separate occasions. And the problems in Argentina have been building for years. This isn't something that's going to be easy to fix. So Javier Milei came into...
I want to make one hopefully quick comment here. The international debt obligations. Argentina is one of the few countries on earth that really has some good geopolitical things going on for it in terms of the food and the energy and the population workforce and all that sort of stuff. I mean, this is kind of a high level view, but there really isn't any reason that Argentina should be getting tangled up in international debt obligations.
Yeah, they can make their own.
Yeah. We'll be likely going over more why that's the case as we continue.
Power and said that he was going to do things in a radical manner. And over the past 8 months, he has been doing that. So he's reduced subsidies that were previously being provided for things like gas, electric and public services to all of the people in Argentina. And there's been a significant increase in the costs that people are having to pay. As you can see from this graphic, the average that people were paying for public services in December 23 was 30,000 Argentinian pesos. Today they're paying over 140,000 pesos for those same services. So that represents an increase of almost 5 times. And it's not just subsidies that Javier Milei has cut back on.
So we've got a 5 times increase hitting the poorest people the hardest. And I mean, I understand the point of, let's get the subsidies out of here, the Austrian argument, let's get the subsidies out of here so we can allow the market to dictate where these resources actually need to go. However, when you've got a country that's already poor and you just smash them over the head with higher utility prices, saying, okay, it's going to work itself out, I don't know how well the population's going to take that.
Right. I mean, you just created a whole dependent populace who rely on these subsidies, and you've monopolized all the energy production in the country. And then you tell people, but we're not going to give you the energy anymore, at least not at the at affordable prices. So it's like austerity, basically.
It's totally austerity
imposed on the population.
Well, and then I'm trying to get into his mindset. I'm trying to put my Austrian hat on, but presuming he has good intentions, right? I mean, maybe he's a secret saboteur who's here to totally destroy the country because he wants to help kill everybody off the face of the planet. If that's the case, then forget what I'm saying. But if he actually has good intentions, I'm sure he's thinking something to the effect, the subsidy is stealing from people.
Right. No, sure. I mean, the argument is that less government intervention and more prosperity. But this is the kind of, from a monetary perspective, the opposite happening. It's less for the private sector and more for the government. So less subsidies, less cost reduction. It's like a subsidy works like a tax cut, basically, right? So basically, ultimately, a higher tax burden on the population.
Right. I'm going to give them their taxes back so they have enough money to spend on, these things, but it turns out that, we're, maybe I gave you 20% of your money back, but things got 5 times as expensive.
Well, but the taxes, I'm not aware that there's been any tax cuts. So far, it's just the subsidies that the guy was just talking about have been withdrawn.
Yeah.
And spending reduced in general. But at the same time, it seems like there's no tax cuts. So this is this is choking off the private sector of the economy.
But things have to get better before they get. I mean, they have to get worse before they get better. They have to go through withdrawals, just like a heroin addict, right? Yeah.
Right.
Let's keep watching. Oh, come on, YouTube. Give me a break. You were working just fine before I started this stream. Come on, he gets into so much good stuff. For the person who just joined, sorry this thing's just spinning. Apparently my internet connection is not as great as I thought it was. Let's stop it and start it. What if I refresh it? Oh.
Wow.
Oh, man. Nima's going to smack me upside the head for that one.
It's messing with us.
Uh-huh. Okay, well, I'm just going to let it go. How about this? Let's chat while this thing's going, right? So, right. I mean, for me, this is really kind of the frustrating point again, which is this things have to get worse before they're going to get better. And this, which is based on this, I believe, equilibrium idea, right? Is that because there's an equilibrium in the economy, and whenever the government does something, it taxes this or it subsidizes that or it, nationalizes this or whatever, that creates a kink that distorts the equilibrium, and you get yourself in a situation where you're creating bubbles or you're putting false signals to investors to say they should invest in this, but that's not a real signal because that's just the government providing a fake incentive. And what you need to do, again, this is the Austrian hat I'm trying to put on. What you need to do is you take all that stuff away so things can start equilibrating, and it's going to be painful during that equilibration.
Right.
But eventually we're going to come out on the other end where people have the opportunity to be richer and more economically prosperous because the government is no longer there creating these false incentives. Now, that sounds good, but as you and I have talked ad nauseum at this point, is that what you're actually doing is you're starving the private sector for the money it needs to have a functioning economy.
Yeah,
right?
You're shrinking the size and scope of the private sector essentially.
Okay, I'm going to hit this refresh button again.
Average that people were paying for public services in December 23 was 30,000 Argentinian pesos. Today they're paying over 140,000 pesos for those same services. So that represents an increase of almost 5.
I would just add to that that there's a baseline inflation in Argentina. So partly you would expect for prices to be higher now than they were then, right? The question is it proportionate to the general inflation of the country?
I think we should write that question down, or at least do our best to remember it, because he's going to go over inflation. I watched like half his video earlier. He's going to go over inflation numbers in a bit.
Because
or are you going to pull them up right now?
Well, I had the inflation stats pulled up from what we were discussing earlier here. The CPI, August 2024's. Okay, what does it say? On an annual basis, consumer prices surged by 200.
Sorry, do you want to share the screen?
Sure. Okay, I can share this. Can I? Inflation. Okay, gotta go here. Share screen. Argentina inflation rate. Share. Okay.
Seeing, boom, there it is.
On an annual basis, consumer prices surged by 236.7% in August. And And so we can see down here in August, the inflation rate compared to 1 year ago, I guess, was 236.7%.
So the inflation rate's actually come down.
The the rate has come down since April. It's basically since May. The rate has started coming down, which is still, prices are still at this point. I guess they're up 236, so they're about
Essentially double. Because I mean,
triple basically.
well, you got to average it out. I mean, because this is like trying to take a monthly inflation rate and extracting it to an annual number, right? That, like the annual interest in the month of August is 236. You had to divide that by 12 to get the August number, which would be almost 24, 20. Like, can't do math in my head. 236 divided by 12. That's 19.66 or 19, almost 20% interest for the month of August.
Inflation. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm waiting for the Fed meeting to determine how far interest rates are going to fall, because I'm about to get two different loans to make the deal happen.
But so about 20% per month, and I just want to put that into perspective with the number. What was this guy telling us? Can you put that back up?
Yeah, so I think this was between.
You have it on the screen there. It's on the paused screen right there. Okay, there. So December 2023. A bus or public transport was 8,000. Now it's 46,000.
Yeah, this is way higher than the inflation, right? So let's take the total number at the bottom. If I take,
it's more like 5x, I guess.
But this isn't a full year, right? We got to standardize this for the full year. So if I take 143,000 divided by 30,000, that's 4.76 times. However, that's in, was that 9 months or 8 months? December?
Yeah, it's like 9 months, I guess.
Okay, so how would I do this? Divide by 9 and multiply by 12.
Okay, so they have, so in other words, we can determine cost of these public utilities have gone up substantially.
Yeah, almost 6.5 times.
Right. And meanwhile, the overall inflation has been coming down actually in the country. Right. So weirdly, these services the prices have gone
skyrocketed. Well, he said they had subsidies, direct subsidies for these.
Right. So the subsidies went away basically, and now people just have to pay more for, for the services. And it's starving the private sector. Yeah. It's, in the Austrian libertarian philosophy, it would be a return to market equilibrium because the meddling is going away.
Right.
But the meddling is, the problem is there's always meddling with everything. All these services are monopolized in the hands of the government, and all the money is injected through budget deficits by the government, if or through export surpluses, but it has to come from somewhere. So we're already in a particular system that is not a free and open system.
Well, I remember saying this to Stefan Molyneux when we chatted with him once upon a time, right? There's this idea that, okay, once we get the meddling out of the system, everything deflates, and then we can all buy more with our money. And I pointed out to Steph, I said, look, when you have deflation, particularly if you're a business, and you have debts that are like when everything deflates, your debt payment doesn't deflate with it, because that's part of a contract you've already agreed to. And I think even more importantly, you can't deflate workers' wages without them losing it. Right? You can't just go to your workers and be like, okay, paying you $20 an hour today, but because things have deflated, I'm paying you $15 an hour tomorrow. Is that great? It doesn't. In reality, it doesn't work like that. So the business doesn't have its product prices deflate. The business just goes out of business. And so what you're doing with this, I mean, if all these prices are going up, and I mean, I don't know what the situation on the ground is in Argentina. I've heard that they're basically using US dollars for anything anyway, but presuming they weren't, how many businesses have now gone out of business? Because, I mean, it's just totally destroyed their profit and loss sheet. And then once all that's destroyed, it's like, yeah, your money is further deflating because there's nothing to buy. Wait, no, that will cause inflation. Sorry. And money is going to further inflate because there's nothing to buy. Let's keep going.
5 times. And it's not just subsidies that Javier Milei has cut back on. He's also reduced the number of government departments by around 50%. In this video that he posted in August 23 during his presidential campaign, he was famously shown as throwing lots of government departments off the wall to close them down. And he's followed through with those promises. He's done that. He's also cut back significantly on public spending on things like education and housing and hospitals and a variety of other things. And so he's doing what he said he was going to do. And he said at the time that things would get worse before they got better. And we
Right. And then I just wanted to stop to stay. I'm not going to stop it because he's going to show the actual numbers of what he's talking about soon.
Definitely seen that happening over the course of the past 6 or 7 months. But in today's video, I want to go through exactly where Argentina is today, what things like taxes, the balance of trade, the fiscal balance are looking like, where we are with regards to inflation and interest rates, and what's happening with the Argentine peso. And at the end of today's video, I'll give you my assessment as to whether or not I think Javier Milei is on the right track, or if he's overcooked it, if he's doing things that are too aggressive for the Argentine economy to be able to cope with, and if he is, what's likely to happen to Argentina over the course of the next 6 to 12 months. But before we get started on all of that, I'd like to say once again, thank you so much to everyone that's supporting the channel. If you've signed up as a Patreon or a YouTube member or a buy...
Please don't load forever. Yeah, go visit his Patreon if you like him. Sure. Here we go. Perfect.
This chart shows the total amount collected by the Argentinian government for tax revenues over the past 12 months. And the scale on the right-hand side of this chart is shown in trillions of Argentine pesos. And what this shows is that in July 2023, the total amount of taxes gathered in by the Argentinian government was 3.6 trillion pesos, which equates to around 3.6 billion US dollars. And you can see that in the following 4 months, in the run into the election that took place in December.
You want me to pause it, Nima?
Well, sorry, I was yawning. Oh, by the way, Andrew said Steph is how he found us. Awesome.
Well, and that our debate convinced him of the error of Steph's ways.
Right. Because Steph has the same line basically about economics that he's had from the beginning.
Andrew, Nima did the same thing for me. So welcome to the cult, I guess, of Nima.
No, yeah, I just wanted to point out here this radical libertarian government in Argentina, and then look at these tax figures here. Taxes have doubled or tripled or something. Total taxes collected.
Well, this is close to 4.5 million, and it's up to triple. I think is 2.5, 3 times is the.
I mean, suddenly they're raking in these giant. What's up with those giant candles there? April, May, June, July. I don't know.
And let's not forget. Put the MMT hat back on. Argentina is sovereign over the creation of Argentinian pesos, right? They've got the money printer, right? They hit the button and it creates pesos in people's accounts. Right. It creates papers. There is literally no need for the country of Argentina to collect Argentinian pesos in order to spend them. Zero. Nothing.
Yeah, I guess in this case, they may argue that this is to reduce inflation, right? They collect more money from the private sector than they're giving into it. Part of it is reducing the inflation, obviously, as we can see in the numbers, but also causing recessions and unemployment.
Just destruction. Right? Austerity, destruction.
Yeah.
2024, tax revenues increased, and by December 2023, they'd risen to 5.9 trillion pesos. However, if we now look at what's happened since President Milei took over, you can see that there has been a sharp increase in the total amount of tax that Argentina is receiving. And the latest figures for July 2024 show that the government collected 11.9 trillion pesos, which is more than 3 times the amount that was collected in July 2023. So what this chart shows...
So I just want to correct him. The government destroyed 11 trillion pesos. They didn't collect them.
Shows us is that Milei is focused on increasing taxes and making sure that the government has as much money as possible in order to pay for all of the things that it needs to invest into. And if we widen the scale of this chart to show what's been happening over the past 5 years, you can start to understand the problems that are being experienced in Argentina right now, because the level of tax revenues has been growing at a very slow rate historically. Back in August 2019, the total amount that was collected in by the Argentinian government was 458 billion pesos. And by the end of December 2022, that figure had only risen to 2.3 trillion pesos. Now you can see that between December 2023 and December 2024, there was an increase to the 5.9 trillion that we've just looked at. However, the most rapid increase has taken place during Javier Milei's presidency. And if you take a step back, you can see that there's been a marked change in the level of increase in taxes. Now, obviously, that's good news from a big picture economic perspective. It's good that the government has more money. However, from a personal point of view, from people on the ground, obviously it's bad news because they're having to pay more taxes. Corporates and individuals in Argentina are going to have to pay for the reconstruction of the economy, and that's going to be painful in the short term.
Did you hear that, Nima? Corporates and individuals need to pay for the restructuring and redevelopment of the economy, not the entity that has sole control over creation of the money supply.
Right, it's a total nonsense. So if there's anything they want to do to grow the economy, they can do that on the spending side. They don't need to be collecting money until they have enough money in the coffers. So they get, oh, we have enough money now. We can start paying for projects, blah, blah, blah. Not how this works. And at this rate, at the moment, what economic development is he talking about? This economic destruction, if anything, that's going on right now.
I also want to reemphasize this sort of conversation can kind of sort of make sense in a developing country that doesn't really have enough of its own resources, that is dealing with foreign currency in order to figure out its investments. You can have a conversation like that. But again, this is a country, it creates its own currency, and it's got a pretty good demographic and geographic and geopolitical situation going on for itself. There's like no reason for any of this.
This chart shows the quarterly amount spent by the Argentine government over the past 3 years. And what this chart shows is that in the period between quarter 1 2021 and the fourth quarter of 2023, there was a progressive increase in the total amount that the Argentine government was spending. Now, if you look at the individual movements of each year, you can see that there's an element of seasonality. We haven't got a constant increase here. There are quarters when expenditure increased significantly, and then it came back down in the following quarter. However, if you take a step back and have a look at the overall trend between the start of 2021 and the end of 2023, there was a significant increase. However, if we now look at the first quarter of 2024, which was the first quarter that Javier Milei was in charge, there has been a significant reduction. And the
real quick, this chart isn't really that fair. The bottom is not zero. So it's not like these peaks are 10 times higher than this one.
Yeah, the problem is that
it is significant.
I can't see it. I can see it on our current EVMux screen because your little tile is over that tiny little piece.
Let me see if I can figure out how to fix it.
Okay, it doesn't matter.
How about this?
Yes, now I can see it. Yeah.
So
wow, it's very impressive in its tininess, I guess you can say.
Right, and I mean, on one hand, it's kind of skewing how the data looks, but on the other hand, this is significant, right? Because if they were up on the 100 billion per quarter spending, and they're down now closer to 90 billion, that's 10%. Right, so they managed to reduce spending by 10% while increasing taxes by what did we say, 3 times?
It looked like something like that.
Yeah. So I mean,
total tax.
This is a double whammy.
Yeah, this is, and I put together some numbers. Basically, since Milei has taken office, the net private loss has been like something like $4 trillion worth.
U.S. dollars or pesos?
Yeah, yeah, dollars. I converted
Okay.
into dollars for this. So because starting I only have data from January through May, and I guess pretty soon we should have more than that. But so Q3, there's not a lot of data yet. But for before Milei took office, the country was running budget deficits pretty much most of the time. Then when Milei took over January 2024, we have a 2.2 trillion drain of money from the private sector. Then a 1.3 trillion drain in February. Then in March, 687 billion. Then in April, 291 billion. Million. And then in May, 2.5. Sorry, it was a trillion. Yeah, 2.5 trillion. So overall total, and so even the current account surplus that I've found so far doesn't anywhere near make up for that. And it's been a total drain of 4 trillion in Q1, and Q2 looks like somewhere around the same.
Yep. Andrew just commented. He said it's crazy seeing libertarians on Twitter act like this is a good thing. Well, it is a good thing if you have an erroneous view of how the economy works. I used to think like this, right? I mean, that's one of the reasons why me and Nima even have this show, is to say if you're starting with the wrong premise, and as far as I've been able to tell, there's two wrong premises: the barter theory of money and the idea that there's this equilibrium in economics. If you start with these wrong premises, you could have the right ideas, right? You start with the wrong grammar, but you have the right logic, which is to say, oh, the initiation of the use of force is bad, therefore, and the government initiates the use of force, therefore, the less we initiate the use of force, the better it is philosophically for everything. Sure, but you started with the wrong premises to apply that to, right? So it's not that like we're saying that the initiation of the use of force is good. We're saying that the engine in the car is not working the way that you think it's working, right?
Right.
Hey, if we suck the gas out of the car, it'll run better. No, however you got there, that's wrong.
Right.
Although I do want to say, at the beginning it showed him that now famous video of him ripping off all the federal agencies. It is like ideologically good to get rid of that, World Economic Forum garbage out of the federal government. I completely agree with that. But again, we put our MMT hats on and say, okay, wait a minute. If you're going to do that, there's different dials that you're going to have to turn certain ways. And he appears to be turning them in all the opposite ways that he should be.
Expenditure in the first quarter of 2024 is the lowest out of all of the quarters. This chart, which is a very trendy graphic that was put together by Bloomberg, shows the fiscal balance for Argentina. And the fiscal balance is basically the difference between the income that the government is collecting in, so all of those taxes that we just looked at, and all of the money that the government is spending. And what you can see from this chart is that in the 12 months from January to December 2023, Argentina was in the red. It was spending more money than it was earning. And obviously, that is a major problem, because if you're constantly spending more money than you've got to spend, then you're going to cause yourselves major problems. You're going to have to draw down more debt, and debt has been a persistent problem for Argentina over the past 100 years or so. Historically, Argentina has defaulted on its debt obligations on 9 separate occasions and has defaulted 3 times since 2001. So having a negative fiscal balance is seriously bad news. But if we look at the situation for 2024, since Javier Milei took over, you can see that Argentina has been in the black in every single month. So it's spending less than it's earning. And that's obviously a good thing, because it means that Argentina can get back on.
Hey, Nima, remind me, what happened every single time the United States did this?
They ran budget surpluses.
Yeah, what happened every time the United States ran budget surpluses?
They had a depression.
Oh. Great.
Or a great recession in one case.
In one case, yes. Ugh. Now this isn't taking the trade balance into account, but we'll get there.
Right.
Onto
right.
an even keel. It can start building up some.
What's that, Nima?
Well, yeah, with trade, it seems like the data is a little more slow to come in. So I haven't really found, more than something about the current account Q1. So, but we're now in Q3.
Well, he goes over it soon. Maybe he's got more up-to-date data than you're able to find for some reason. Here, I'll keep playing. Oh, we're spinning. Nima, do some cartwheels.
The wheel of death is back.
My 4-year-old son has figured out a cartwheel, and he's super excited. He cartwheels around the house now. But he can only do it on one side. I'm like, do it on the other side. And he's like, I can't.
In jiu-jitsu, our coach made us do cartwheels out of nowhere suddenly. It's like, now everyone do cartwheels. You do your standard exercises after lining up, the rolling and all this.
Yeah.
And now everyone do a cartwheel. And everyone's like, what? But then we were able to do our crappy cartwheels somehow.
Did you do a one-handed cartwheel yet?
No. Come on.
Okay.
I mean, I was very proud that I still was able to do a two-handed one.
Okay, we're spinning again, so let's tap dance here, Nima.
Okay, what were we talking about? Oh, yeah. So, I think net private unsavings, I guess you could say, is at about 7 trillion for the year now. So, and now we have Q1 and Q2 negative GDP growth. I guess I can share those numbers well.
Yeah, go for it while we're waiting for this to figure itself out.
Okay, what do I have here? GDP growth. Okay, share. So Q1. Oh, no, that's Q4 2023. So even here, too, I only have Q1 data. But we do see Q1 with the big budget surpluses.
And I'm sorry, this is trade balance? What are you looking at?
This is GDP growth rate.
Okay.
So Q1, it's declined by 2.57%. And the next quarters we're still waiting for, I guess.
Okay, I'm going to say, there we go. Here we go. We got it. Remove from scene, add to scene.
Cash and being able to do things the right way rather than having to borrow more and more money constantly and running the risk of a default. If you can build up a cash surplus, obviously that's beneficial for the economy overall. But one of the accusations that's been targeted against Javier Milei is that he has been too severe with the cutbacks, and those cutbacks are now causing problems in terms of loss of jobs, loss of income, and therefore potentially could mean that Argentina goes into a deep recession for a long period of time. It's one thing cutting spending to enable you to have a positive fiscal balance. However, if you're damaging the economy, then clearly that is not going to be good news in the long term. This chart shows the balance of trade.
Just small thing I want to say here. So this is an open question. Actually, I'm not going to say what's right or wrong here. I got an opinion on it, but should the purpose of economic decisions at the political level be to control inflation, or should the purpose of these economic decisions at the political level be to achieve full employment? What's more important, inflation or employment? And the central banking system of the world has seemed to answer inflation.
Yeah, the bankers, the banking lobby will have one answer, and the industry lobby will have another answer.
Oh, I did it again. What is up with this? Isn't this thing supposed to, yeah, look, it's preloaded here.
Yeah, it's
What's
buffered.
your problem?
for Argentina over the past 12 months. And if you follow the channel, you'll know that the balance of trade is basically the difference between the value of all of your exports and the cost of all of your imports. So basically, it tells you whether a country is spending more than it's earning or earning more than it's spending. And what we can see here is a very clear trend. In the 5 months from July to November 2023, Argentina was running a negative balance of trade. So basically, it was paying more for its imports than it was receiving for its exports. However, over the past 7 months, that position has completely reversed. So if we have a look at the figures involved here, in July 2023, the balance of trade was minus 700 million US dollars. The deficit actually increased to around 1 billion US dollars in August. By November, the deficit was around 560 million US dollars. However, by December, which was the month when Javier Milei took over as president, Argentina reported a positive balance of trade of $1 billion, representing a turnaround of $1.5 billion in 1 month. And as you can see, over the following 5 months, there was a progressive improvement in the balance of trade. And in May 24, Argentina reported a $2.7 billion positive position. Now, over the past couple of months, that has actually reduced. And the most recent figure for July 24 was positive $1.6 billion. So when you take a step back and look at this, it looks like a remarkable turnaround. It looks like Javier Milei has really put Argentina back on track to getting in control of its finances. However, as with anything, the devil is in the detail. We need to establish exactly how Argentina has managed to turn its deficit into a positive situation in such a short space of time. And the simple answer to that question is that Argentina has significantly reduced the amount of goods that it's importing. In July 2024, the value of goods imported was down by 16.5%, with the most significant...
Is that because nobody can afford anything anymore?
Reduction being in fuels, which are down by almost 34%. So what this chart is showing us is that Javier Milei is trying to get control of the economy by cutting costs and reducing spending rather than increasing income and trying to grow the economy. This chart...
So, one thing to say about that. I mean, I think the guy kind of hit it on the head, which is they're not necessarily exporting more stuff. They're just importing less. But if I were in charge of Argentina, like, I would know what to do. But if I were in charge of Argentina, I think they do have a real problem. Like he's mentioned several times on this international debt situation, they do have an international debt in dollars. So they got to get dollars from somewhere to make those international payments. And as we know from countries that have hyperinflated, the idea of, okay, we'll just print our own money and sell it on the open market in order to buy the currency that we need to turn around and make these payments is one of the pieces that leads to hyperinflation. So I definitely wouldn't recommend doing that. But Argentina will need to figure out how to get a source of dollars to make those international payments somehow. Nime, do you have any comment on that?
Yeah, so their external debt, I'm just looking this up, is about 290 billion US dollars. So that seems significant, but technically they don't need any of this, really.
They don't need it, but I mean, they'll have to pay it off. I mean, unless they just default. I mean, I guess they've default again. They've defaulted 9 times. I mean, they just default again and say,
they don't have to. They don't have to pay it off. But I mean, they think they do because they think they need the approval of international creditors, etc. But they could just do their own programs and use their own money, and they would be just fine. They've been doing this whole dollarization of the economy for decades now. It's never really worked well for them.
And didn't Milei double down on that?
Well, Milei has apparently talked about bringing Argentina back to that. We discussed it on our last show about Argentina. So yeah, he's sort of considered that. I don't know if there are any concrete plans at the moment. But yeah, but that's normal, right? So somebody needs, Argentinian private sector needs dollars to pay off their dollar loans. So yeah, they need to export products to the US in order to get those dollars. Good point, I guess, that he's saying that, okay, the current account surplus is only going up because we're buying less, which is like along the lines of, it makes sense given that the private sector is being starved so much.
Yeah, they don't have enough money to buy it. It's my initial assumption.
Right. And whoever's doing the exporting in Argentina, they're still exporting into strong economies, I guess, like the US and whatnot. Mm-hmm. So they're, sort of doing fine, I guess, on that. The export businesses seem to be doing fine on that front. But the domestic economy, domestic demand is declining, and GDP growth is declining, and unemployment is rising. I just found this year unemployment has jumped up to 7.7% in Q1 of 2024. The prior quarter was 5.7%. Before that, 5.7%. So it's not been this high since Q3 2021.
Which was COVID era.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, right now things are not looking good. And the trajectory looks very bad. And so I don't want to know what things are like in 3 more months from now, half a year from now. There would have to be, like we said on our show before, there would have to be some counterbalancing relief coming for the people, massive tax cuts, some, sort of giant tax reform.
Federal transition job, something.
Right. Yeah, federal transition job program. That would be huge for them, for sure. So, yeah, let's see what else this
What else he pulls up?
guy's saying.
This chart shows the movement in monthly inflation in Argentina. So basically what we're looking at here is the change in prices from one month to another. So this isn't the annual inflation rate, which is the rate that we normally look at when we're talking about inflation. And the reason I wanted to show this is really to have a look at what's going on within each month to get a feel for whether or not Javier Milei is getting on top of what's going on with inflation. And what this chart shows is that in July 2023, monthly inflation was running at 6.3%. So that means that basically prices had risen in July by 6% against the prices for June 2023. So this isn't the annual rate of inflation. This is simply the increase within 30 or 31 days. So obviously, if prices are going up by 6%, that represents a serious problem. However, they increased by 12.4% in August and a further 12.7% in September. And this is why the annual rate of inflation in Argentina is significantly above 200%. And we'll come on to look at what the actual year-on-year movement in inflation is in a moment. Now, as we've discussed, Javier Milei took over as president of Argentina in December. And in that month, the monthly increase in prices was 25.5%. And if you annualise that rate, it would equate to inflation of more than 300%. Now, if we look at what's happened since Javier Milei took over as president, you can see that there has been a significant and marked reduction in the monthly rate of inflation. It fell to 20.6% in January, 13.2% in February, 11% in March, 8.8% in April, 4.3% in May, bounced up a little bit to 4.6% in June, and the most recent figures for July 2024 show that monthly inflation is now down to 4%, which in relative terms is a good outcome compared to the 25% that was being experienced in December. Now, obviously, in real terms, in real money terms, a monthly increase of 4% would equate to annual inflation of more than 50%. So that's still off the scale in comparison to most countries' inflation. But what we are seeing here is a definite trend for inflation slowing down. And that's really one of the points to make here when you look at this chart. Inflation is still rising. It's going up by 4% per month. So prices are still rising. When we discuss reducing inflation, it doesn't mean that prices are going down. It means that they're going up at a slower rate.
He's going to get into the central banking interest rates right after this, I believe, and I think we're going to find a very interesting correlation. I'm going to keep playing.
This chart shows the annual rate of inflation in Argentina over the past 12 months. And one thing to note about this chart is that the scale on the right-hand side doesn't start at 0. It actually starts at 100% and goes up to 340%. So all of these bars are above 100%. If we look at the situation back in July 2023, annual inflation was running at more than 113%. And it continued increasing in the final 5 months of 2023. And by the time Javier Milei was appointed as president, the annual rate of inflation was 211%. Now, as we've just discussed, since Javier Milei took over, the monthly increase in inflation has started coming down. However, inflation itself continued to rise for the first 4 months that Javier Milei was in charge. And by April 2024, it was up to 292%, which was the highest rate in the whole world at that point. Now, over the past 3 months, there has been a slight reduction in the annual rate of inflation, and the figure for July of 263% is almost 20% lower than the figure for April. However, as you can see from this chart, 263% is still the highest rate of inflation in the whole world. In fact, it's the only country that's in the 200s, and the only other country globally that has inflation of more than 100% is Syria, which is a war-torn country. And the country with the third highest rate of inflation in the world is Turkey, with around 62%, which is more than 200% less than it is in Argentina. So even though we are seeing a positive trend, the month-on-month inflation figure is coming down. Javier Milei is doing something to move the economy in the right direction. It isn't coming down fast enough, and Argentina is still an outlier in terms of the total inflation in the country. And
real quick, I don't think that's really fair, because when you look at the annual, you're looking at, okay, what happened last year, right? So, like, if it's August now, what happened August last year? Well, if the prices have already doubled, and then you start slowing it down to say, okay, you know, the price has doubled since last year, but let's stop it from going up. Yes, there's going to be kind of like this delayed annual inflation where prices, every time you pull the monthly data, will have been doubled since last year, even though you've slowed it down now. So I want to give Argentina a little credit here. I think this guy's making it out. Not that it's not bad, but I don't think he's giving credit in the right spot.
And the current rate of inflation is significantly more than countries such as Venezuela, Zimbabwe, Iran, Cuba, Haiti, and Egypt, all of which are in varying states of economic crisis. So this really puts into perspective how serious the situation is in Argentina right now.
Here we go. Here's what I want to do.
This chart shows the movement in the official rate of interest in Argentina over the past 3 years. And if you follow the channel, you'll know that there's usually an intrinsic relationship between interest rates and inflation. And the central bank in most countries tries to manage inflation by moving interest rates. So usually when there's times of high...
Okay, here's exactly what I wanted to get to. So this chart goes back further than the charts he showed before. The charts he showed before go back about a year. So, like, right here, right? Is this not almost exactly mimicking what we saw before? Right? Well, the interest rates were low right before Milei takes over. Then they shoot up, the inflation was in quotes low, relatively low. Right before Milei takes over, then they shoot up really high, and then they're coming down really low. And as we've pointed out on the show over and over and over and over and over again, the traditional understanding of how interest rates affect the economy is backwards from what the evidence seems to show. Right? Higher interest rates cause more inflation because you're injecting more money into the system, as opposed to, we're curtailing, the money expansion because we're making it harder for people to borrow money. So my interpretation of this is one of the reasons the inflation went up is because you raised interest rates, and one of the reasons the inflation is now coming back down is because you turned around and lowered them.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible, but we also saw other figures earlier as to government deficit spending coming down, or rather just swinging to the opposite, which is just government money collection, basically,
right,
from the private sector. That brings inflation down. Then, of course, paying lower interest rates on the money that's in bank accounts will also bring inflation down. So there's different effects at work here, right? So I don't know how.
So, sorry to interrupt you, but I just wanted to emphasize this. Look at what these interest rates were. Basically at 120%, now down to 40. 40's insane to begin with, but they were up to 120. So these aren't like 25 basis points, right, adjustments that are being made by the Federal Reserve Bank. These are massive swings in a couple months.
Right. But also, as we know from Professor Werner, central banks seem to be followers when it comes to this kind of stuff, not leaders. So if inflation figures come in lower, which they have in Argentina, then that appears to be the banks, the big factor they take into account for interest rate policy. So we've seen that inflation, the CPI index has come down in Argentina over the past couple of months, and their central bank has a meeting. So they look at that indicator and they determine, okay, inflation has been coming down, prices have been coming down, so we can lower the rates and follow. So this is what, if there's one sort of relationship you can establish between interest rates and inflation, is that central bank interest rate policy seems to always follow inflation, not be
cause it.
not be causal in creating it or slowing it down.
Let's continue.
Inflation, a central bank would look to increase its interest rates to discourage companies and individuals from borrowing. That usually then results in a reduction in demand, and a reduction in demand usually results in a reduction in prices, so inflation comes back down. That's the logic. Now, if we look at the situation in Argentina when Javier Milei took over as president, interest rates at that point were at 126%, which was the highest level in the whole of the world. And as you can see, over the previous 12 months, there had been a number of interest rate increases. Now, if we look at the situation since Javier Milei took over as president, you can see that Argentina has been reducing its interest rates rapidly, and the current rate is now 40%. So that represents a reduction of 86 percentage points over the past 8 months or so. Now that defies logic in terms of what I've just discussed. Usually at times of high inflation, you would expect interest rates to be increasing. However, that strategy was clearly not working over the previous 12 months because interest rates rose to 126%. And as we've just discussed, inflation over that same period increased from around 113% to almost 300%. And the reason why the increase in interest rates didn't bring inflation back under control is that there is now a disconnect between the two metrics as a result of the fact that a lot of people in Argentina have lost faith in the Argentinian currency, the peso, and are now using the US dollar instead. So,
what do you make of that comment, Nima? That what are the main reasons that there seems to be a disconnect between the traditional understanding of how interest rates affect inflation and the fact that so much faith has been lost, they're not even using it in the Argentina peso?
I don't know about that. I mean, I have honestly not heard that the people accept and use the dollar in Argentina. I know that they've linked their currency to the dollar many times throughout history. I don't think currently it is, but I don't know that it's kind of like some of these other South American countries like Panama or whatever who actually literally have dollars circulating all the time. I don't know.
I've heard, I can't confirm or deny it, I've heard that is the case. Not that they've ever made the dollar the official currency, but that it is pretty common. I mean, was it even Milei mentioning at one point, like, everybody's got dollars hidden in their mattress because that's the currency they got to use because ours is worthless or something like that?
Could be, yeah.
Yeah. I'll keep playing. Maybe. No, but I mean, while this thing is spinning, I guess we could just reiterate the fact that everything that we warned about in our last show to not do, he's doing, and we're kind of seeing the results we predicted if he did that.
Yeah.
And he's gonna get away with it for a little while. We'll see how long. With it's got to get worse before it gets better.
Right.
We're going to go through withdrawals.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. We're going to be Venezuela for a little while. Bear with me here, folks. Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, how long are people going to be interested in eating dogs
Yeah.
and cat food?
Yeah. Like how, that's a good question for Austrian economists. How long are the withdrawals supposed to last? A year, 10 years, 100 years? You know, how long before it's like, you know, we're not interested in you repeating like this is just leftovers from the previous system. I guess we're going to find out in Argentina.
Yeah. Yeah, if he doesn't have some sort of plan for
basically people
relief. Yeah. Well, if he doesn't have some kind of plan for massive relief, then it's not going to look good.
People are no longer borrowing in pesos, so it doesn't really matter if the central bank increases interest rates. It doesn't put off anybody from taking out loans because nobody was going to do it anyway, because the peso is falling in value so rapidly. And just to put the current interest rate of 40% into perspective, this chart shows the...
Small note. Not that, I mean, Argentina's in so much chaos, this might not even apply. But if I borrow in money that's worth half today, and it's, or how do I want to say this? If I borrow 100 Argentinian pesos today, inflation goes up 200% by tomorrow, and I got to pay 100 pesos back tomorrow, that's actually a benefit to me because the debt is easier to pay back, and it's a detriment to the bank.
Yeah.
Now, again, I don't know if it might be so crazy over there that nobody's taking that into account, but inflation does benefit creditors.
Yeah.
And not debtors. No, I got that backwards. Inflation does benefit debtors.
Yeah.
Not creditors.
Correct.
Am I going to learn my lesson here?
The countries with the highest rates of interest in the world. And as you can see, there are currently only 2 countries with higher rates of interest. Venezuela, where interest rates are over 59%, and Turkey, where they're 50%. And I've talked about both of those countries at length in previous videos. They are both in a state of economic crisis. Argentina is number 3 on this list, and the next highest rate of inflation is in Ghana, at 29%, followed by Egypt, Nigeria, Malawi, Congo, Sierra Leone, Iran, Lebanon, Liberia, Zimbabwe, Angola, Pakistan, and Russia. So that really puts into perspective just how serious the situation is in Argentina. Despite the fact that it's reduced its interest rates rapidly over the past 8 months, it's still one of the highest in the world, and it tells us that the problems are not going away anytime soon. This chart shows the movement in the official exchange rate between the US dollar and the Argentine peso over the past 12 months. And when you look at this chart, it does look very unusual, doesn't it? And the reason for that is because Argentina is managing its exchange rate. The official exchange rate is not floating, it's not set by the markets. The Argentine government is setting this price. So that's why we are looking at a very unusual chart. Now, if we look at the situation before Javier Milei took over, $1 was officially trading for 376 pesos. However, one of the first things that Milei did when he took over was to devalue the currency, and he reset the official exchange rate to just under 800 to $1. Now, over the past 8 months, you can see that there's been a continued reduction in the value of the peso, and this is planned by the Argentine government. They are continuing to reduce the official exchange rate. However, the current rate of $1 to 945 pesos still does not reflect the true market value of the peso. We can only see that by looking at the black market rate. This chart shows the black market rate, or the blue dollar rate as it's referred.
Real quick, Nima, do you have any idea why an Austrian/libertarian leaning guy would say, okay, let's devalue the international exchange rate of our currency by 1/3 to 1/3? I mean, the only thing I can think of is that benefits exports.
Well, his argument would be this is the market rate. We're just getting it closer to the market rate.
Oh, he just arbitrarily picks a market rate?
Well, no, because the chart that you're seeing right now, right there, is a black market rate, and the government decreed rate was too high for the peso. So all they're doing is reducing the value of the peso to its market value.
To in Argentina, which is basically the rate at which pesos trade for on the streets of Argentina. And as you can see, the current rate for $1 is 1,350 pesos, which is around 30% worse than the official rate. And the problem that Argentina has is that as it continues to reduce its official rate, the blue dollar rate also deteriorates as well. So there's always a gap, which means that people do not want to use the peso. They don't want to be paid in pesos. They don't want to hold their savings in peso. Everybody is much more comfortable with US dollars. And that's why there's a disconnect between interest rates and inflation, and also why inflation continues to rise, because people are wanting to use dollars rather than pesos. So the peso is continuing to devalue, therefore it can buy less in the international markets. Imports are more expensive, therefore they push up prices, they push up inflation, and it becomes a very difficult cycle to break. This chart shows the unemployment rate.
Any comment on that, Nima?
So basically, he was just pointing out that the true demand for dollar versus peso is much higher than the decreed rate, and he was also pointing out the reason for that. People prefer to hold the dollar, and indeed they prefer to save and exchange with the US dollar. And seems to be like Gresham's law in action here, basically.
Explain that for people who might not be too familiar.
So the good money drives out the bad money. So people prefer to dump the peso and acquire the US dollar because it's more stable.
So even if the government is trying to say, okay, we're going to make it stable by fixing a price, no matter what price they fix it at, people are still willing to pay more for dollars because they just want dollars so badly.
Yeah. And people are also, I guess, on the private sector, exactly, they're not willing to sell dollars at the valuations that the government has set, the official rate. And so this is why the black market develops. And I'm guessing that at the official exchange rate places where you can get the dollar so cheaply, like in this case for 300 pesos before Milei took over, they are probably hard to get into. You know, I imagine it's probably waiting times, lots and lots of people trying to get in there, restriction of services, and I mean, that's just my guess as to it. Because otherwise, why would people go on the black market and buy the dollars so expensively?
Right.
So you don't have
Keep
to
talking because we're loading. Oh, here we go. Maybe. Yeah. Okay, we're good.
This chart shows the unemployment rate in Argentina over the past 3 years, and the figures here are shown for each quarter. And what this shows is that in the period between the second quarter of 2021 and the fourth quarter of 2023, there was a continued reduction in the rate of unemployment. Back in the second quarter of 2021, unemployment was running at 9.6%. It then came down to 8.2%, and over the following 9 quarters, there was a continued reduction. And by the end of 2023, unemployment was sitting at 5.7%. And if we expand the scale of this chart to show the position over the past 25 years, you can see that that was the lowest level that Argentina had experienced at any point during that period. So that in theory, you would say, well, that represents a good thing. If unemployment is low, the country must be doing well. However, as we've discussed many times before, statistics can be misleading. And one of the things that Javier Milei wanted to target as part of his presidency was that there were far too many people being employed, particularly by the state in governmental positions, and he wanted to reduce all of that expenditure. So one of the things that he did as soon as he took over was to close down a lot of government departments. We saw the video of him pulling things off the wall earlier in today's video. And the figures for the first quarter of 2024, which is the first quarter that we've seen reported since Javier Milei took over, show that unemployment is now up to 7.7%.
Okay, this reminds me, a long time ago, I don't even remember if this was recorded, you and I had a conversation about the broken window fallacy, right? This is a thing that the libertarians and Austrians like to jump up and down, that Keynesian economists supposedly like to create the broken window fallacy, right? We'll build windows and then we'll break windows so we could pay people in order to fix them, and then everybody has a job. And that's totally preposterous because you're not creating real wealth in the economy. And then you pointed something out, which is to say, well, yes, that's true, but if that's the only freaking way, because everybody's so stupid, to get money into the economy, I guess it's better than nothing. Right? So, on one hand, it's true that these federal agencies are stupid, but if that was the only way to get people employed, dude.
Yeah, I mean, if this unemployment means there's people who want money and don't have it, and the government, the one thing they can do is create money and spend it
to employ people,
hire the unemployed. So, perfect trade, right? Perfect exchange. They want money, don't have it. Government has infinite money creator. So technically, Yeah, that's how it should work. The reason for unemployment is the government's taxation to begin with. So if they've caused the unemployment, they need to provide some sort of venue to pay the token, pay the tax.
Okay. Keep going.
Which is the highest that it's been since the third quarter of 2021. So what we're seeing here is that the policies that are being implemented by Javier Milei are resulting in mass redundancies, particularly of people who were previously employed by the state. Now, that might be good in terms of reducing your spending and bringing things like the fiscal balance back under control. But what isn't good is that people are being put out of work. So they're no longer earning, they're not being paid as much. And so those people will now be joining the many others in Argentina who are struggling to be able to afford enough food. And this overall doesn't represent a solid start in terms of putting the economy back on track.
I think he nailed it on the head right there.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, regardless of these federal agencies having bad ideologies or not, you just took a bunch of people and made them unable to afford food.
Yeah. Exactly. And I guess now what's the plan, right? So technically you would think, okay, we are going to throw all these people out there. What we said in our last show would be a transition job program for all these people that are going to be unemployed because of the cuts. And that would mitigate all the bad effects that all of these policies are going to bring about economically. But then, maybe this is what they want. Maybe it's a trap set for Milei or for his people behind him to step into, to really step into it.
Let's hear this guy's conclusions. He hasn't given us a lot of opinions yet. He's just displaying the facts.
So what's the summary and conclusion today? Well, I wanted to post this video because I think what's happening in Argentina is absolutely fascinating, because this is a country that's been in long-term decline. In fact, over the past 100 years, it's defaulted on its international debt on 9 separate occasions, and it's had 6 recessions in the past 10 years. So that's really as bad as it gets. And we've seen consistently different presidents coming and going, people with new ideas and policies never actually being able to turn the country around. And I think that's one of the reasons why Javier Milei was actually voted in as president. He got around 56% of the vote, and it's reported that he's still remaining as that popular. That's basically where he is today. So everybody is still supporting Milei 8 months into the job. And what we've seen from today's video is that there have actually been some major steps forward. When you look at what's been going on with the fiscal balance, Argentina is now back in the black. It's actually spending less than it's receiving.
You can't afford to buy food, and you have your utilities 5 times as expensive, but there's this chart that looks really good over here.
But the treasury account number is black. Yay.
Yeah.
So it can afford to make all of those payments, and that's absolutely great.
It can always afford to make those payments.
And it's the same with the balance of trade. The level of imports and exports are now balanced to the point where Argentina is making a profit. It's spending less on its imports than it's earning from its exports. In addition to that, the monthly increases in inflation have come down significantly from over 25% when Milei took over to around 4% today. And the official interest rate has also come down from 126% to 40%. So all of that represents potential good news. It all looks like things are moving in the right direction. However, we need to look into exactly what the implications of all of this are for the economy. And what we've seen from today's video is that Javier Milei has started off his presidential term by looking at the costs. So he's reducing all of the costs. So he's cut back on expenditure, he's cut back on imports, he's cut back on the number of people employed directly by the state. And all of that is helping put everything back into the black because Argentina is spending less. However, in order to get out of the current situation, Argentina needs to start earning more. It needs more income to be able to pay for all of the essential services. And there is...
What's this guy's name? Joe Blogs? I'm guessing Blogs might not be his real last name. I'm going to tag you on X. And you're way bigger than us. So first, we'd be very gracious if you'd have us on our show or do a show together. But let's have a chat. I think you'll find what we have to say about this very enlightening. Because the government does not need to increase its coffers. It does not need that black to increase in order to spend for anything within the Argentinian peso. And in fact, it's actually crippling itself in the process by even trying to do that.
There is a risk when you look at what's been going on that Javier Milei has cut back too aggressively, and we're now starting to see things like unemployment rising rapidly, and that is going to be bad news for the long-term growth of the Argentine economy, because in order to grow, they need people to be in jobs earning money to be able to then spend. All of the companies can then sell more products, and all of that leads to good long-term healthy growth. But what we're seeing in Argentina right now is the cost cutting and the cutting back on public services is meaning more people are out of work at a time when inflation is still running at more than 250%. Argentina is off the scale compared to the rest of the world for its inflation. So things are becoming less and less affordable every single day in Argentina. And the more people that are put out of work, the more are going to be put into the poverty trap where they literally won't be able to afford to buy enough food. So I don't think Argentina is anywhere near out of the woods yet. Javier Milei has, as he said, cut back on a lot of expenditure. So he's reduced the amount that Argentina is spending. But what he really needs to do is get the economy fired up and growing. It needs to start expanding. People need to start finding employment. Companies need to start growing to get their export markets going. And they also need to get inflation back down to a manageable level. And 250% is nowhere near manageable. 200% isn't. 100% isn't. 50% isn't. It needs to be down to somewhere in the region of 20 or 30%, which obviously is still very high. And Argentina is a million miles away from getting to that point. So I think the overall summary of today's video is that Javier Milei came in a blaze of glory. He said he was going to do things radically. He started off doing exactly as he said. He's made all of these cutbacks. He's reduced the expenditure of Argentina. But what he really needs to do is get growth into the economy. And he needs to do that rapidly because the longer this situation persists, the worse it's going to get for more and more people. And there is a real risk that his popularity will start to dwindle. And if that happens, then he may have to leave power. And if he did, then somebody else would come in and take over. And it looks currently like Argentina is on a knife edge. If Javier Milei can start the growth, if he can start getting things going in the economy, then he has a chance of being able to turn things around. But unfortunately for him, he's facing a very long history of problems in Argentina, and those problems are very difficult to fix. He's having a go. He's doing his best. He's trying to turn things around. We're seeing some green shoots of recovery, but nowhere near enough to tell us that Argentina will get back onto an even keel at some point in the future. So I think the outlook for the next 3 to 6 months is that it's still going to be very, very tough in Argentina. We're likely to see inflation continuing to be high. Interest rates will be high. We're probably going to see rising unemployment. The fiscal balance and the balance of trade may well be in the black, but if you're not spending enough to grow the economy, that really isn't good for the long-term prospects for Argentina.
So, I mean, I don't know what he's going to wrap up here with, but I think we got his point. I agree with him in the sense that they got to be spending in order to get the economy back and going again. But again, the disagreement here is that the government needs to be in the black before they can make that happen.
Yeah, that's just not a objective. That's not a figure that should be used as an objective in any way.
Well, I mean, I think it's even worse. It's not that like it should be ignored. It should be opposite. Like we have to see the numbers in quotes in the red on the government side so that we know that it's in the black on the private sector side. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Technically, it should be the unemployment should be the number to target, and we should target full employment. And until we get there, there's no excuses not to do something. Of course, the problem is if the government proposes spending that is very stupid, then yeah, I don't like to do that either. But if it can be simple stuff that can employ people, which would be a job guarantee program, it would be so perfect because it would be so apolitical in a sense.
Yeah. And I would take what he said further. He said, like, for the next 3 to 6 months, we're going to see it really bad here. Again, I think this is kind of alluding to the withdrawal phase of, we got to go through the hard times. I'm predicting, and I'm guessing you're predicting this too, is that this is going to get terribly worse for much longer and stay absolutely horrible until the government can start spending again. And have a deficit.
Right. I mean, the question is, if there's something happens on the tax side of things, then that could that could improve the situation. But right now, it seems to be sort of like an accelerating trajectory towards doom.
Yes. Well, and let's bring up the tax situation here real quick, because we've talked about this in shows in the past, where if you take MMT, which is neither left or right, we could have a left view of MMT or a right view of MMT. A left, in quotes, view would be add more spending by creating more programs and whatever. The rightist view would be let's remove taxes.
Yeah.
And you and I are on the same page of like, oh, let's remove taxes, right? We have a system that works. Talk about the United States. We have a system that works. Just remove the burden from everybody so we can do what we need to do to get the economy running. I don't know if that's the case here, because if you have so many people unemployed and the system is totally in chaos, yes, I agree removing taxes would be good, but would that be enough when you don't have a fully functioning system in the first place without something like a federal transition job? No comment?
I wouldn't say that they don't have a fully functioning system. They're a pretty developed economy in Argentina. So it's possible, but you don't know until you try it, right? So
yeah, good point.
There's no benefit that these taxes and whatever the private sector is being burdened with play economically. So, and we've seen them increase like crazy. You know, this crazy stat that this guy was showing us
4
in the beginning.
times, 3 times, whatever it was.
Yeah, which is not what should be happening if you want to free the private sector from the grips of the state. That's kind of the opposite of what should be happening.
Well, and as you've mentioned before a ton of times, you know, if we're looking at two options of cut taxes and increase spending, cutting taxes is so much easier because you just write on a piece of paper and it's
exactly
done.
It's such a fast dial to operate. It doesn't require any action. It requires inaction. It requires the stroke of a pen, exactly. And it affects so many economic units all simultaneously without any work having been done, because their attitudes will change, their behavior will change, their plans will change. So yeah, the most common sense thing to do, but of course that's not what's happening. Right. Yeah,
well, I feel sad for the people of Argentina that they have what looks like this excellent opportunity. This guy that's got some new ideas, that's going to change things, and they do not seem to be going down a path of goodness. So I guess like Joe Bloggs said here, this is probably something that we need to check on in 3 to 6 months and see if whose predictions coming true, because so far it looks like ours is. Unfortunately. Anything to add to that, Nima?
No.
Okay. Well, we'll leave it at that. We'll do another one, like I said, 3-6 months somewhere down the line to see how it's going on. And if you're from Argentina, then man, I hope do your best. And if Joe Bloggs, you happen to hear this, well, we'd love to have a conversation with you because I think it'd be very productive. This has been Dylan Moore and Nima Major of IRETA TV. Check it out at ireta.tv or your video hosting platform of your choice. YouTube, Rumble, BitChute, Odyssey. We're on all of them. Just search for IRETA TV. And we appreciate you watching, and we'll see you next time.